Hello, welcome to the channel and thanks for watching. And in this video you'll see my Spartan tank come out of the pile of shame and get painted up for my Death Guard army. And as part of that I wanted to do something a little bit weird, so I've done that rather cool demonic doorway you see in there. This video is not really going to be about painting the Spartan itself, because that's fairly standard to how I do the rest of my Death Guard, and there's loads of videos on that. But I'm going to focus on what I've done for this kind of rather cool doorway. Now when I built the Spartan, I did build it with opening doors and all that kind of stuff. It is a great model. I ended up gluing those shut, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. Now step one to get this demonic doorway is I've taken the Roticus Great Unclean one, which you might have seen on the channel before, not painted it yet, used some blue stuff to cast up that little hand part with that really rather cool mouth. Now I'm not going to go into too much about how to cast blue stuff. I've got a really good video on that which I'll link down below, you can check out. But suffice it to say, at the end of that casting process I've made this little green stuff mould here of the hand. Now I had a bit of cleaning up to do. There's a little bit of a thing underneath the tongue there where there's obviously an air bubble in the mould, but apart from that the casting came out really nicely. So check out that video and you can see kind of, not easy to do, but how relatively easy it is to take parts from other models. Now, time to start doing this conversion. So I've mixed up a big ball of milliput, you see there, and that's a 2-part epoxy kind of putty, stuffed it into this doorway and pushed the casting from Roticus's arm into that milliput. Pushing a little bit under where it was peeling up, you can see there it's kind of, because it's not a straight piece, it's literally off a very dynamic hand. Used the sculpting tool to make sure it was all pushed in under there, and I used my fingers to kind of expand the blob out onto the armour, because I wanted it to look like this kind of greater demon was possessing the tank and pushing its way through the door. Now you notice I glued the left hand side door on, the right hand side I didn't here, so taking a pair of clippers I've measured it up against where that face is coming and literally just clipping very roughly and ripping it off and peeling it, the sections that will go around the face. As you can see they're very rough, very sort of damaged. Glued them in just with plastic glue onto these areas. Now all this work is being done while this milliput is still wet, and this here is another little casting taken off Roticus that I start to mould in and think, right, how I'm going to make this kind of demonic possession blend across the model, and I hated that first piece, so I peeled it off, and as you can see the milliput is still very wet, so I just pushed it all back into its place, you know, a bit of water on there to blend it down, and found another piece that I'd cast up that was more acceptable to it. So when you are doing these things, I had a sort of plan for what I was doing, but I wasn't 100% set. So don't, you know, if you do something you think, oh, I don't like that, don't be afraid of pulling it off, starting again. You could have even taken the whole milliput off and literally restarted the whole program. Now this is a casting of another part of the Great Unclean one with a few little pustule bits on, a bit of a thinner casting, and fits in better I think with what I'm going for, the final effect. Now on the casting of the arm, obviously the arm is covered in tentacles in the Roticus model, and the casting didn't capture all of those, so just a little sausage of milliput that I've rolled up and stuck onto the end of where one of those tentacles is coming off the side of the face. Now originally I was going to cover it with a door panel, but I thought it was just an interesting way of putting a bit more detail coming out kind of onto the model. So again, push that little sausage in there, use the wet sculpting tool to kind of merge it into place and make it smooth tentacle going in. And again, when you're working with milliput and green stuff, keeping your fingers wet or using some Vaseline, there's lots of techniques to stop it sticking. I will at some point do like a top tips on milliput and green stuff video at some point, I'm sure. Now what I'm dropping on here is literally tiny balls of milliput and green stuff that in previous projects when I've had a little bit left, I've just rolled a few balls, put them to one side and let them to dry, and I keep in a little bag, so I've always got a bag of kind of milliput balls, something that's very useful as a Death Guard player, both for this kind of thing and for basing. So I've pushed those balls into the milliput before it's set, and then using the sculpting tool just to make sure that, you know, the milliput is actually touching all the surfaces of the ball and it will stick in. And I really just go around and drop them in to make it look kind of like it's blending in with the cast pieces I've done, and to make it look kind of demonic enough. Now once I'm happy with the amount of balls that are in there, taking the end of a pointed sculpting tool, you could use a cocktail stick or the end of a brush or whatever, and I'm just poking small holes and indentations into that milliput, because that's how the Great Unclean One skin in this instance has been done. Left to thoroughly dry, so this stuff will be sort of touch dry within sort of 2-3 hours, but I've left it way overnight, so 24-40 hours before starting the painting scheme. What I'm doing here is making it blend into the model. Now that was a grell and earth, and that's a crackle paint. You can see here around where the green is how it cracks and make the armour look broken. So all this stage is about making the actual casting that I've done blend in. So you'll see the dark brown stuff around the outside. That's typhus corrosion, which we'll come back onto later. So I want to make it look like it's bursting through, it's rotting, it's breaking up the armour. So now in the painting, a full layer of Rakkar flesh across the whole model. Now we're working on a scream of pink into the tongues and the lips and all those kind of areas. Now this is the same paint scheme I've used on the sort of demonic flesh before, but I've never had this bigger piece coming out of the model before. Now this is super sped up, this is 3 speed. Just thought I'd show you very quickly a little bit of sort of wet blending. This is probably not the best way of doing it, but this is how I do wet blending. The one I'm putting on here is the Screamer Pink, and it's a relatively wet layer onto the bottom sort of 3/4 of the tentacle, then taking that Rakkar flesh, which is what the rest of the skin colour has been done, and painting that on, but starting from the pink area and pulling it towards where the Rakkar flesh is, and that then creates multi-hued pinks running into the flesh. You can see me blending it in there, and then taking some Rakkar flesh and starting from the lighter pink area, moving towards the dark pink, and essentially it blends together and makes a real weird mix of kind of 4 or 5 different pink colours coming out of the skin. So that's my kind of very quick idea of wet blending. And as you can see, the tentacle looks a bit more interesting just than being one solid pink colour or one solid flesh colour. So now drop it into the mouth, and we could have done this with the Screamer Pink and just watered it down a little, but I decided to use a contrast paint. This is Major's Purple. We will come back to this again, but I'm putting this into the mouth and also on, you can see there the eye flaps where the skin's peeling out from the eye, kind of the fleshy areas. So we're using some very similar tones right across this kind of mouth of this demon. Dropping onto the teeth with a bone white there, and then the Vallejo deep yellow on all the pustules. And this is a theme that I follow right across all of my Death Guard, all my pustules and things like that on yellow, and it really ties the army together, gives a cohesive scheme. The reason I'm not focusing so much on the Spartan paint scheme itself is you could use this daemonic technique and the moulding I'm doing here to put it onto any army bursting out of any tank really. So the fact it's Death Guard's semi-irrelevant. And going back to the Spartan build, I did do a lot of battle damage on the Spartan. Didn't show it on camera, but we've done, drilled some bullet holes, we've scuffed and scraped the tracks, we've clippered some bits off to make it look that little bit more battle damage and fit in with the fact that, it's been in use for thousands of years and now finally it's accepted a demonic incursion kind of thing. So now we're putting a Vallejo sepia wash. This is what I use on, again, all my Death Guard to really dirty them down. Not a technique you would have to do, but I like that dirtied effect. And this is after we've done then, after that wash has dried, a couple of layers of the green back on the armour. You can see it's really grim, grimy armour. It's not quite finished at this point, but just showing you kind of where we're at. Now going back over all of the demonic areas with the same colours I've already used. Now the idea for that is the original colours have been dropped down in kind of their brightness and vibrancy. You're going back over them, but you're only putting it on the sort of raised areas. So if you can see where I've put that Rakkar flesh everywhere, you can see the kind of deeper colours in all the recesses, and then it goes up through a level, series of grades of colours we're going. So going back over every part with the same paint we've already used, even to the extent on the tentacle there of doing the same sort of wet blending effect where I've skipped past it. You don't need to watch it again, but it's going and using the same colours. So back onto the teeth here with the bone white, and just putting it on the raised area so that right up near the gums you've got where the wash is quite deep, and then further out from the gums you go, you're putting slightly less paint on the closer to the gums you are, more paint on the further away from where you want that sort of recess to look dark. So this is quite a diluted paint I'm using for all of this, using off a wet palette, so it's quite thin. The last bit you saw was me touching up the typhus corrosion around where the flesh is, and then it's back onto the mouth with using the Major's Purples. Now this is the bit we're doing slightly different to the first time around, taking that Major's Purple we've done in the mouth and putting that around the pustule areas, around kind of the eyelid areas and those kind of things, because we're bringing some of that colour onto the rest of the skin areas, but very, very thin, and we're spreading it out, not leaving it to pool. Same thing with the green Beal Tan shade here. You can see, put it on, you can see how deep and dark it is, but then spreading it around from that area so it lightens it off. And actually that kind of flesh area, the possessed area, now has tones of purple, tones of green, and then finishing it off with a Nurgle's Rot sort of seeping from all the pustules. And if you're a Death Guard player or any Nurgle player and you don't have this paint, go out and buy it because it's amazing. It makes the model rotten, but also it's a great one for covering your mistakes. If you've made any mistakes anywhere, slap a bit of Nurgle's Rot on it and it looks fantastic. So there's the finished effect. So that's the cast up gross demonic doorway on my Land Raider Spartan. Hope you liked that. If you did, like, comment, subscribe. See you on another video.